there is a little bit of, yeah, I love Canada, and we have to take people through a bit of a mourning process sometimes, that the Canada you think we're in is not where we're at. Like, it's a dumpster fire, and we got to do something to save ourselves and to save our future generations. And so it's more the social part of it. So what about healthcare? What about education? What about the pension? What about helping the poor? What about making sure that all of uh, these nets, these safety nets are still there? There's this fear that the minute we're independent, we're not going to have any of that. And so to be able to walk these ladies through, well, no, actually, we'll not only have them, we'll make them better.
Mm-hmm.
We'll make them better. And even like for those, like, I'm pretty much a libertarian. I don't stand on your own 2 feet, but at the same
Us too.
time, right? At the same time, if I see someone in need, I'll be the first one to make sure that they've got what they need, if they're actually in need. And then once we talk about that, talk about our hospitals being so much more vibrant because we're not going to be under the Canada Health Act. We'll be able to do things and help people in ways that we can't do now because Ottawa says we can't.
Welcome back to the Critical Compass. My name is Mike, and this is James, and we are very pleased to be joined by Miss Kathy Flett, an advocate for Alberta independence for at least the last 6 years. She was advocating for Alberta independence before it was cool, and she's been a very loud, very prominent, and very important voice in the movement for a long time. Kathy, thank you for joining us today. We really appreciate you taking the time, and maybe you could start off with just kind of giving our viewers a little bit of a introduction to yourself, how you got involved with this movement, and kind of what you've been up to for the last 6 years.
Sure. So I got involved. I've actually been a separatist, quote unquote. We're not supposed to say that word, but I've been a separatist for a very long time. And I just didn't know what to do with it. I didn't get involved in politics. I was too busy raising children. And then in 2019, opportunity knocked, and the whole Wexit thing kind of came on stage, right? Came on the
Right.
scene. And I was like, oh, you know what? The kids are grown now. Maybe it's time. And so I went to a meeting, like how most people do, right? I went to a meeting, met the guy that was the head of it at the time, and said, well, whatever I can do to help, let me do that. And so I got involved, and we caught lightning in a bottle. And then, of course, there was the federal election, and it just exploded right after that in 2019. And so those meetings that happened in Edmonton and Calgary and then in Red Deer, well, I was one of the ones on that stage that was talking.
Hmm.
And then it was gone. As fast as it came on, it was just disappeared. And I had never ever been in politics before, like involved. I've always thought I knew what goes on in politics. I tried to be an educated voter, but I'd never experienced the backside of it. So I was just trying to figure this out, like what happened. And then I sort of sat there and I don't know what I'm supposed to do. So I guess I'll just stay home. So I stayed home until the phone rang, inviting me to a different meeting with a bunch of different other folks who are also involved in politics. And long story short, 2020 began with me being part of, at that time it was called the Freedom Conservative Party. And then it changed its name over a couple of months, about 6 months later, I guess, to the Wild Rose Independence Party of Alberta. And then we were catching lightning in a bottle there too. And I was traveling the province, talking and trying to build up all these CAs and learning as I go, and again experiencing sort of the backside, the ugly side of politics. And no sooner was that party, we were polling at 40% without even a seat in the legislature. It was crazy. And then it gone. Like just gone. And I'm like, what the hell? Like what is this? And so I learned that in this independence movement, what happens is people blame infighting, right? That it's always infighting that pulls it down. It's people's egos, whatever else not. And I watched it 3 times right before my eyes that's only half right.
Mm.
What actually happens is infiltration. It's infiltration. So people
Interesting.
that right? People that do not want to see this happen And there's lots, and we know who they are, and that's fine. But the ones that don't want to see this happen, they find the low-hanging fruit. They find the ones that will do their bidding for them within that organization. It doesn't even have to be a political party, within the organization of the political party or whatever it is that's going, and say, "Hey, if I do A, B, C, and D, will you take on this assignment for me?" And so then they pull it down from within. And that's what happened. I was like, "Well, that sucks. Now what do we do?" So Angela and I, my good friend that we started the AWIN together, we decided, well, we've got a provincial election coming up. Why don't we just run as independent candidates and see what happened? And so we did. And of course, neither of us won because you don't typically. But oh, we had the time of our lives and discovered that we just loved it and slept for a week after it was done. I've never worked so hard to not win in all my life. Like, never. And I don't like losing, but, yeah, but I learned so much, I made so many connections, and then again, we sat there and said, "Well, now what?" And once the dust settled with the UCP and we had Danielle Smith now as the premier, sort of, like, not just because she replaced Kenny, but because the province voted for her to
Mhm.
be the premier, and then all the MLAs and everything was kinda shaken out there. uh, we realized that the independence movement hadn't gone away. It just sort of tucked back a little bit until we got this provincial election out from underneath us. And we started to see some names pop up again. And these were all names we knew. We had, worked with them or knew who they were, experienced what they were like, what these folks were like, and said, and in some cases we're like, "Oh yeah, that's all great." And then in other cases it was like, "Oh boy, that's not good." And we thought, well, what are we going to do? How are we going to, there's a gap here. How do we fill it? So Angela calls me up one day and she says, "I have an idea. We need to reach the women." And I went, "No, no, no,
Not women.
no, Angela, we don't. Like, no, this is a terrible idea."
Uphill
I
battle.
right? Exactly. I am one. I know what's coming. And and so she says, "No, just hear me out." She says, "Think about it. Everything that we've been through, particularly with the Wild Rose Independence Party, it's not that women weren't involved, but we were always completely outnumbered by the men.
Mm.
And it was very hard to get women to kind of come into those trenches because it's ugly and it's dirty and it literally is a pig pen in politics. But they don't have a voice. We need to give them a voice. And they're not hearing this message. There's a disconnect. They're not hearing this message in a way that makes sense to them because we think about things much different than you guys, obviously, right? We're wired
Mhm.
different. And so we sat down and finally I agreed. And we sat down and we came up sort of with this presentation, this very simple presentation that would speak specifically to the women. And the point of the presentation was twofold. One, to show the ladies that, first of all, we can't fix it. We can't fix it. And 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 that then it kind of goes into a bit of a crisis mode when women realize that. You can't fix Confederation. It's working like it's designed.
Hmm.
This is how it is. So you can't fix it. From there, then we were able to go on and talk about, okay, well, what's important to you? How are we going to help you walk through this to realize that the only hope for your kids and your grandkids and your families and your communities, your church is independence? What do we need to talk about to help you get there? And how do we create this network across the province to do that? And 30 meetings later since March, we've done it. We've done it. And that's how it started. But then the other thing that we discovered is in these meetings, the men didn't like getting left out. They wanted to come too. And we're like, "Oh boy, okay." And so this could be interesting. And it was interesting because in those meetings, if the number of men and women were fairly equal, the women would talk a little bit. If the number between the men and women were not equal and there was more women, they would talk a lot. But the minute it changed the other way and there was more men in the room, the women would go quiet just because. It's not, it's not good, it's not bad, it just is. That's just
Mm.
that's how most women are. The guys get talking and sometimes you guys get a little bit of aggressive when you're talking and we tend to not like that aggression. And so just step back and let the boys fight. But the minute it was the other way around, well then the women would be so much more willing to participate in the conversation. So I'm hopeful one day I'll meet Jordan Peterson and he can explain that to me. But it just, you know, and so then that presentation, I ended up just sharing in bigger groups because it was working. I thought, well, why not? Like, there's women in these bigger groups. And then that took off. And the next thing I knew, APP wanted me to be one of their speakers, and that was really cool. And then that just has now gone into Stay Free Alberta. So there you go. There's the Coles Notes version of how I got to where I am.
Right on.
Yeah.
Oh, it seems like it's the kind of case where if you don't find politics, politics will find you. And a lot of people will stumble into it. And it's out of that curiosity, it's out of that necessity. And
Yeah.
I've noticed that there's a few different voices going on right now. And I think you're fitting a very good niche because there's an overrepresentation of people who are very loud, boisterous, are able to rally up people who are already excited and are on board with independence.
Mm-hmm.
But there's actually less value in rallying up those people. They're already sold. Like, what else are you going to convince them of at that point?
Yeah.
So I've been looking around, and now we have more of a need for people to communicate to those who are undecided, who are moderate, who have misconceptions, who might maybe like have an emotional argument at first, and you have to not be reactive to that. You have to like listen a little bit, kind of dispel these concerns and reframe it in a way that makes sense. And that's a skill set not everybody has. And I'm thankful to have more voices like you to kind of play that role as well.
My pleasure. Yeah, because that's exactly what happens. That's exactly what happens. And even in a meeting that I was at over the weekend at James River, who even knew there was a James River? This is the best part of this, right? I get sent to these little popcorn holes all over the province that nobody even knew existed. It's lovely. And James River is literally a community hall. That's it. It's a community hall smacked in the middle of all these range roads. And there were people lined up for like half a mile down the road to sign that petition there. And after I gave my presentation, there was this one guy, he was just really, really struggling with this whole negotiating with Ottawa thing. And he couldn't wrap his head around it. He just and I could see but I'm not catching what his disconnect was. And I'm asking him questions and he's trying to answer. And I just like, Lord, you gotta help me. I do not know where this guy's coming from. Like you gotta give me something. And it was like he did because I went, I get it. And he said, "What?" And he's in the back of the room, right? There's like 200 people in this room. I said, "You think we're going to go negotiate a better deal with Ottawa after this referendum?" And he said, "Yeah." I said, "No, we're negotiating our divorce, man." And he went, "Oh," and the whole room just lit up. And I was like, oh my gosh, I just stumbled upon something. Just
Yeah.
in the Q&As of where that disconnect is with people and what they're not understanding. So that was it. Okay, presentation gets changed again now because they're not going to be the only ones. I know now when I'm speaking next week, I'm all over northwestern Alberta, and I'm going to have to make sure as best I can that I remember to point that out so people aren't confused.
Yeah, because I mean, that's going to be a consistent issue that the movement faces, especially as it gains momentum, where people, might have a notion that this will be like a Quebec type scenario where, we'll just accept certain concessions, and
Yeah.
it's sort of beyond that point. Right now, I would say. I want to go back to a point that you were mentioning about the engaging women.
Sure.
There's sort of a known like psychological effect, but a psychological difference between men and women in that women are much more oriented typically to a consensus filter versus men. Like men are it's much easier for the average man to be disagreeable and get into an argument. Like that type of thing isn't that
It's
I
not
can't think of the
foreign
word.
to you guys. Yeah.
It's not foreign. It's not difficult for us to wrap our heads around. Like, we're okay with it. A lot of us enjoy it. Maybe a couple guys on this podcast right now.
Mm-hmm.
But with women, it's much different, and there's a much greater push towards an amicable consensus. And I was reading this article about how And I'm sure you know this and you've seen this, how the differences between politically between men and women have been the gap has been widening over the last decade and a half. Women becoming much more liberal, men becoming more conservative, but not as much. But there's definitely as far as the gap widening, it's been crazy with women going much more liberal. This seems to coincide with a increase, like with the prevalence of social media
Hmm.
and the accessibility of social media apps. Women are presented as there are more, there are more younger women on these apps that tend to be, young people in general tend to be more liberal, but especially younger women. And so if the average woman is presented with these types of ideas, you can see how this would lend itself to a consensus filter. So I think what you're doing is so important to get a voice out there of somebody who's, you know, just to look at you, if you had to make people make assumptions about people just based on how they look. You're a nice, normal lady. You're not like, you're not yelling and screaming. You don't have purple hair and piercings. You're not like you have a
Yep.
family. You're a well-adjusted human being. And
Well,
I think
see,
that's very, very important because that's good is what is going to give other women permission to explore these ideas in a way that they might not have thought they had before.
oh, that's cool. Yeah,
Sorry,
yeah.
that was a bit of a screed.
No, that's all right. I never thought of that. It's true. Yeah, it is true. It does give them permission. And, oh, well, yeah, if Kathy and Angela are saying this, or Tanya, she's another great female voice as well, or any of the others that we've chatted with, then maybe there is something to what we're saying. Yeah, that's true.
Mhm.
Find that
Mhm.
consensus piece.
Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah,
just allow them to explore the idea. Just allow them to intellectually get there, in a way they might have not even opened that door before.
that's true. That's true. That's a good point.
Just to build on that, maybe, have you noticed a reoccurring kind of a hurdle when trying to communicate with some women where you're presenting ideas and you get to one thing that is just a stumbling block? Let it be maybe they have empathy for like, oh, we gotta feel for Canada and I owe them something, or maybe there's some other roadblock in there. So
It's the social stuff. It's the
Mm.
social stuff. There is a little bit of, yeah, I love Canada, and we have to take people through a bit of a mourning process sometimes that, yeah, okay, but the Canada you think we're in is not where we're at. Like, it's a dumpster fire, and we got to do something to save ourselves and to save our future generations. And so it's more the social part of it. So what about healthcare? What about education? What about the pension? What about helping the poor? What about making sure that all of uh, these nets, these safety nets are still there? There's this fear that the minute we're independent, we're not going to have any of that. And so to be able to walk these ladies through, well, no, actually, we'll not only have them, we'll make them better.
Mhm.
We'll make them better. And even like for those, like I'm pretty much a libertarian. I don't stand on your own 2 feet, but at the same
Us too.
time, right? At the same time, if I see someone in need, I'll be the first one to make sure that they've got what they need if they're actually
Mhm.
in need, right? Like there's that. Yeah, so that's what it is helping these ladies through all of that the social part, the nurturing part of it, because that's what we do. That's
Mhm.
how we are, is to nurture. So to make sure that all of that is still there. And then once we talk about that, talk about our hospitals being so much more vibrant because we're not going to be under the Canada Health Act.
Mhm.
We'll be able to do things and help people in ways that we can't do now because Ottawa says we can't. It's ridiculous, right? We won't have to wait for years to be able to get something done. You'll be able to get it done, and not because it's private healthcare, because it's our healthcare that we're doing and making sure that it works. And our schools can be cleaned up, and our roads can actually have the potholes filled in. You don't have to wait for snow to do it. Like it there's just so many more things that can happen that way, and once that dreaming begins, then those ladies go, "Alright, where do I sign? What do I
Mhm.
do?" Yeah. So it's giving them that permission to dream too, to go, "Yeah, you know what? We can do this. How do I help build it?"
Yeah, and it's and that particular hurdle is not, limited to women. I mean,
No.
we get into these arguments every day with men too, on our YouTube and on our X about, The idea that what we're giving up is so valuable that there's just no way that an independent Alberta could replicate it. And it's like, listen, man, when you actually like learn about what your CPP pays you versus what you paid into it, you'll realize how much like it's garbage. Like you shouldn't want to save a system like this. You should be you should be screaming to have a system that
Right.
is more like, I don't know, maybe the Quebec pension plan that's been in existence for 60 years, and they get the Quebecers pay lower premiums, get higher payouts, and the overall success of the fund is very similar year over year to the CPP anyway. So, it's one of these. It's an education piece, and this leads me to what I wanted to just mention. At the Edmonton canvasser training event, you had a speech that you started the event with, which was awesome. It was such a the history lesson that I mean, I knew a lot of this stuff going in, but like I felt like I knew a lot anyway. But after listening to your talk, I mean the depths. I mean, you go into like the 1800s even, and like
Mhm.
the amount that there is to know about how screwed Alberta has been and how our quality of life has diminished, how our standards of living have dropped. Just the education piece is so it's so robust that I don't know how anyone can form a solid opinion against the idea of independence until they even have a baseline of what you taught us. Like what do you think is if you had to lay out maybe two or three of the most important points of your talk
Mhm.
that an average uneducated person on this issue should know that might change their mind and start to view Alberta and confederation differently, what might you pick out from your talk?
How we were even brought into Confederation usually does it.
Mm,
So a lot of people will argue with us now and say, well, you negotiated this, and so too bad, so sad, you signed on the dotted line. Well, no, actually, we didn't. The reason that Alberta and Saskatchewan were created in 1905, both of them, there's the Alberta Act of 1905 and the Saskatchewan Act of 1905. The reason that they were created at that time was because there was this big boom that was coming over here, and the people that were moving here, predominantly from the States, but from everywhere, were saying, it's really hard to get anything done around here when there's no politicians to put their stamp of approval on anything. We need to change this up. And they had this idea to create the province of Buffalo out of Alberta and Saskatchewan that we know today. But Ottawa had a canary over it because they knew that if our numbers, and the people were coming from everywhere, right? They knew that if our numbers, if our population outgrew theirs, then the balance of power would shift to the West from the East, because that's how the Westminster system is designed.
mm,
Whoever has the population has the power. And so that's why they divided it in half and literally colonized us. There was no negotiation. It was, this is how it's going to be. Too bad, so sad. We're appointing you each a premier, a liberal one, by the way. And this is why I'm completely confused. All the folks that are tearing down statues, having a meltdown over colonization, to be on our side. Like, they really should. So when I get to that, and then the light bulb goes off and go, oh my gosh, yeah, we haven't had a say ever since. That's the first moment where people realize it's working exactly as designed. It's working exactly as it's supposed to. And then when I keep walking them through how our senators are chosen,
mm,
how our MPs are chosen, is it supposed to be representation by population? That's the second bit. Well, okay, let's check that out. And you saw that, Mike, right? I show all the numbers
yeah,
of how many people per senator across, what do I pick, 5 provinces. And then I
mhm,
do the same thing for the MPs. And in a room of 500 people, you won't hear a noise
yeah,
because everybody's just looking at the screen in absolute disbelief that
yeah.
this is what we live in.
Yeah, that's what I was. I mean, I kind of knew the numbers. I probably could have rattled off something close, but like just to see it laid out like that, to see the percentages and the average number of people per MP and per senator, it's like you kind of you mentioned it, you cannot negotiate your way out of that. You'll never be able to just mathematically.
Well, you need 7 provinces and then the representation of 50% of the population through parliament, and what are the chances of that happening already, like, you've created a power imbalance, and then you require power to be leveraged within that imbalance to change the power structure. So you've you've created a no-win situation from within, and it seems like the other thing I lean on in some of these conversations, and you'll get people who'll get NDP supporters saying, "Well, the conservatives are corrupt, or this group's corrupt, or they did this, or they did that." And I'll
Mhm.
ask them, why is our system designed in a way that enables corruption? If you can agree that they're corrupt, then what you're saying is that right now the system, it gives full license for people to do that, or it's so easily corrupt, like it becomes so easily corrupt that we don't have really a way of stopping or holding everything to account. So if that's the case, Alberta independence is a way for us to revise the system, put those safeguards in place, those checks and balances, and pretty much anybody who's complaining about the corruption, left or right, doesn't matter what colored shirt they're wearing right now, like, wouldn't that be a good opportunity for us to lean on?
It should be. Yeah, it should be. The other thing that I also say when I give my talks is with regards to opening up the Constitution, and you're right, right? You need 7 premiers making up 50% of the population. Imagine what could happen if they said, "Yeah, sure, we'll do that." And mathematically, we don't have the numbers, and they make it worse for us. What are we gonna do? Why would we even risk that? It makes no sense. It makes no sense because we already know how it's going to end. And in the Westminster system that we're in, it's on purpose top down. That's how it's a monarchist type structure because it's from England. So of course it is. And so even the people that have an issue with the monarchy should be on our side so that we have a chance to correct all of these wrongs that have been done to us for over 100 years.
Yeah. Speaking of that, when you hear an argument, let's just say, for example, let's take an argument about um, crown land.
Mm,
That's a common thing you'll hear. We've had the lawyers on. We talk about the what crown land actually means, the difference between federal and provincial crown. Where the treaties lie, things like this. Um, when you receive objections like that from people, from well-meaning people, maybe even who
yeah.
are concerned about, like, well, listen, how are Indigenous treaties going to be managed? Like, what what is your normal response to that, or what do you have a series of talking points or something that you would give to a person who's concerned about something like that?
That question comes up all the time, and it's a good one. I'm glad it does because it keeps
Hmm.
the conversation going, and it's an uncomfortable conversation that most people don't wanna have, right? Especially that one. And so the long and short of it is that the treaties that are across Alberta, all of that land was ceded. That means it was
Hmm.
given up. And that's part of those agreements was that the Aboriginals that lived here at the time said, "Okay, we'll give out all this land and then we'll live right here in all of these little pockets of land across the province and sort of belong to the federal government, not necessarily the provincial, but all the rest is ceded." And then when we became a province, that ceded territory became part of the province of Alberta's property. So Crown land is Alberta land.
Hmm.
And when it comes to the Aboriginals, what irritates me the most is how many people just think they can speak for them.
Hmm.
Like, are
Hmm.
you
That
kidding
they're a
me?
monolith. Yeah.
Right? You can't take that as treaty land. Well, have you asked any of them what they want? Like, really? Are they enjoying living in squalor? Do they
Yeah.
like not having running water? Have you driven by a reserve to see what I grew up around them? I grew up in northern Alberta. Like, anybody who says that kind of stuff is, I'll just say it, they're completely uneducated. They have not
Mm.
gone out to see the living conditions that not all, but a good number of them. And it seems to me that the folks that live there may want to have their own ideas explored as to what they want their future to be. And it's not for us to decide. They are Albertans as well. They get to check the box. And if enough of us say, yep, you know what, we're ready to explore another way of making this work among us, we will sit at the table and away we go. And quite frankly, if those chiefs think for 1 minute that they're going to speak for everybody on this, they're wrong. I want to hear from the ones that check the box, not the ones that say that they speak for everybody. And that seems to go over pretty good when I say that.
You can draw a parallel to pretty much like some of the loudest voices trying to keep Alberta and Canada are just the ones that have some kind of vested interest. They're benefiting off the system in some kind of way, essentially grifting at a large scale.
Yep.
And this includes those entrenched in bureaucracy, those entrenched in some of these political parties, more federalist leaning, and that includes some of these band chiefs who don't have the accountability in their current role. And what happens with the money, we're not entirely sure. So the accountability is not there, and they're not wanting to like end the gravy train right now. So, which makes sense. But if maybe we keep clear with this separation between the individuals living in these conditions and those with entrenched interests who are benefiting off the system and leeching the money and power away from those others. Because those are two different groups. They get summed up as a monolith, but they are two different groups.
Well said. Well said. And we're seeing it, right? There's a couple of Aboriginals that are treaty who have gone public with a statement saying these chiefs don't speak for me.
Mm-hmm.
And it's good. You know what? We don't want them to speak for you. We want to hear from you. You're our fellow Albertans. We want to know what you say.
What about the contradiction? So we've heard in the last like decade that first of all, Canada is a post-national state with no firm identity. So we heard that. And now we have maple syrup branded nationalism. It's like this like cartoon version of like what it means to be a patriotic Canadian. And then we also heard for the last 10 years that like, well, Canada is a colonialist, genocidal state and evil by all metrics. And then people are fighting to stay in that same genocidal, colonial, evil state. So like, what is it? Is it like, is Canada so corrupt
Can't be
from
both.
the ground up? Like, you can't disparage it and then paint this rosy picture when it's politically convenient now. So if it is true that Canada, if Ottawa, if the federal government has wronged these people and they got a bad deal, wouldn't this be an opportunity to create a better future under your own terms, to negotiate something in your favor now that you have a chance to negotiate where you did not have one before? So it's an opportunity.
Exactly. It's a huge opportunity. A huge opportunity. Now, with those opportunities, of course, comes responsibility. But yeah, it's a massive chance for the folks that live on those reserves to have a second chance. Really, at the end of the day.
You know, I've had this discussion with my day job. I have the opportunity to interact with a lot of different Northern Alberta Indigenous groups who purchase from my company, and they I ask them whenever I can. I ask them sort of like just very casually, just like, hey, you know, there's a lot of talk going on about Alberta independence lately. Do you have much of an opinion on that? And an opinion is usually split. Almost always very thoughtful and very very nuanced. Usually the what I hear is that like the most common refrain I hear is that people are worried in these bands on these reservations that they're worried that as little as their voice seems to matter right now, that it might matter even less. That there might be they're worried that even though they've gotten a raw deal from the federal government, at least there seems to be like some sounds being made, you know, the right words being said, and they're worried that perhaps they'll be forgotten about. And I think, and I try to bring this up as much as I can, um, no matter, like, people tend to view people who are either very opposed to independence or who are um, simply just uneducated on it, seem to view it as a left right issue.
Mm-hmm.
We don't think it should be a left right issue. It's more of a top down issue. Like you say, we have pretty strong libertarian leanings as well. And so we're mostly concerned as far as the authority level of the government rather than the position of it left right, because governments change like that, opinions change. Um, and so I try to make the point known that regardless of wherever you sit politically, this should be an opportunity for you, because now your voice goes from being essentially meaningless because
Right.
federal elections are decided before polls even close in Alberta. Now you have actually a very powerful voice. Your percentage of influence has gone way up. So you now have a better ability to advocate for yourself and your own interests too, regardless of where they stand on the political spectrum.
Exactly right. Exactly right. And on top of that, be at the table with people that actually want to hear what they have to say,
Yeah.
right? Ottawa doesn't care what anybody has to say but Ottawa. And that doesn't
Yeah.
matter who's in government. It doesn't matter. That's nonpartisan. It does not matter who's in government. They don't care outside of
Mhm.
those walls what happens. And so we've got this chance now, this opportunity to say, well, you know what? We do care about you because as far as we're concerned, you're Albertans too.
Mhm.
And let's work this out. Let's figure this out. I'm not saying we'll agree on everything. I'm sure we won't, but doesn't mean we can't try and figure it out. That's my new favorite word is that everything is figure outable.
Yeah.
So let's chat. Let's sort it out.
So I've kind of been mulling on this thought where if the foundations are shaky and people don't feel like they can fairly contribute and they don't see people working together in a constructive way, I feel like you get these little power struggles where if somebody feels like they have no power, they'll
Mhm.
find power in some kind of way. And I think you get that a little bit with some of these indigenous bands right now. They feel like they have power in the sense that they can disrupt or block or assert their voice, but it's being represented in a very like, you don't care about us, therefore we don't need to care about you. And they will block things to assert their importance or like, this is our
Mhm.
power. We deserve to have our voice. And they will wield that in whatever way they can. And again, this reinforces that a system built upon a shaky foundation is reinforcing these behaviors that ultimately create these kind of behaviors. Because we're out of the cooperative mindset at this point.
Mhm.
And also, you could zoom out a little bit further into confederation and say, right now, between provinces, this is less of a cooperative endeavor where the idea what we were told about confederation is we're all in this together and we're helping each other and we're supporting each other. But if that was really true, confederation would function a little bit differently. And if we lean back on this principle of Posywit or like the purpose of a system is what it does, like what
Mhm.
we're seeing confederation do is not in alignment with its stated purpose. So its real purpose must be what the outcome is right now. So I feel like we need to shift towards this cooperation or a system that enables cooperation at multiple levels. And if you can get that emerging naturally, that would be the best.
Well, and it's going to be a real exercise in trust, isn't it? Because this is a political problem, so it requires a political solution. But nobody in their right mind trusts politics.
Hmm.
Right? You can't. And so that means we're going to have to trust each other, which is also it's equally hard to do that.
But
But
we're getting a shared origin story in the process. So people look to Quebec and say like, well, they got this history and this culture and a language and this and that. And as the Alberta independence movement grows and there's more and more pushback, I don't think
Mhm.
the East is realizing they are becoming the villain in a story that is essentially going to glue Albertans together. The harder they push, the more they demonize. And it's happening more and more. And I feel like as they realize that there's more of a potential for independence, the more the anger comes out because they have to deal with this idea, like these two competing ideas in their head. Like, well, these are bad people, and oh, they're traitors, but there's a legal pathway, and they're doing it peacefully, and they are being positive, and they're like these things don't coexist. And what comes out is anger, but that is gluing Albertans together. So I feel like if we can again build a community around it, and so
Mhm.
assets to the community, including what you're doing on your end, that is giving license for people to feel comfortable stepping forward. We saw that a little bit during the convoy where people felt like they were lost, like there was nobody who shared any of their views, or
Right.
maybe they felt alone in the workplace and were like, well, can't really talk about this with friends and family. And then the convoy comes, and now it was safe to actually explore these ideas.
Well, and I think what's happening now that the petition has started is that we thought we knew how many people want to explore this idea or might even be full on convinced. Now we're finding out. Now we're finding out because there's not one location that there's not a lineup that goes all the way out and around the building. Even the one in Edmonton, that first one, right? All the way out and around the building, down the street, through the parking lot. And then the one on this last Saturday at Rundle Park. That was wild.
Mhm.
For Edmonton. I mean, I was watching this. I didn't get anything done. I couldn't go because I had some Zoom meetings and whatnot here. But I'm on whenever I could, I'm on my phone on Twitter, like wanting to find where's all the pictures? Who's doing what? What's going on where? And then everybody was posting pictures from all of these different events. And I finally just threw on there, like, I'm sorry, Edmonton, I need to apologize. I was ready to build a wall around you, but I take that back. Like I do.
Yeah.
I take that back. I will eat my humble pie. I'm I was wrong, and I don't think I've ever been so happy to be wrong. But and that's that strength in numbers, which is giving people permission to talk about it, which is giving people permission to explore the idea and go, "Well, wait a minute. What about this and that?" But it's also, as you said, James, it's causing that the people against us to get a little louder and a little
Mhm.
meaner and a little more crass, and, uh, and I just tell people, "Just ignore them."
Mm.
I get in trouble for that because people wanna fight back, but it's really not worth our time. That's not worth our
Yeah. There's certainly a balance to strike there because it's, and we, we're not innocent of this either because we like to defend the movement, and I'm on there on our Twitter and listen here,
Yeah.
I try to
Exactly.
reel her in as much as I can, but yeah, I have that impulse too, and that's what sort of makes me empathize a little bit with people who have a strong impulse the other way because if you truly have this notion in your head that these, filthy separatists are trying to break up the country because they're greedy and they only want, they want to poison the environment with the oil and they don't care about, all the good things that Canada does around the world and they just want to be selfish and insular. Like, I get it. If that's what you truly believed, that would make a person angry.
Sure.
What do you say to a person like that? Like, what are some of the tools that you use to kind of lower the temperature a little bit with these types of individuals? Because I gotta say, I saw in a group chat a link to one of the posts about how long that lineup was at Rundle Park, and James was there. Actually, we have a couple videos on our channel about it.
Yeah.
It was awesome to see, but I made the mistake of clicking on this Reddit link and looking at what the /r/Edmonton Reddit was talking about it. And they truly are discussing this movement in like apocalyptic terms of like, we gotta do something about this. Like this is, we gotta stop them. We gotta counter their like as if it's like they're strategizing in a military campaign. Like what do you how do you even begin with somebody like that?
Well, I think there's 2 camps that are part of that group. There's the ones that they're the paid problem, right? They're being
Mhm.
paid to create this and to stoke the fires and to make people angry and upset, and what are you gonna do about that? Like, you can't fire them because somebody else is paying them to do it. The paid
Mhm.
literally paid opposition. Nothing you can do about that. the ones, unfortunately, that they're able to kind of loop into their argument, if those folks are so far gone that they just don't wanna see it, you're not gonna be able to do anything.
Mm.
The,
You won't do it.
maybe there's a we'll see if Mike agrees with my strategy. I've been stress testing this. I've been engaging with the trolls, um, not to convince them, not feeding them
Right.
in the sense of like, I guess feeding the trolls is normally described as like you get sucked in and you get emotional and you call them a bad person or something. And then they feel like you've met them at their same level of emotion. They feel like they
No, they're
got
totally
something. Yeah.
justified.
For sure.
But what I treat is a lot of these discussions, let it be online or with somebody, I realize that I'm not going to convince them. But if there's other people, usually it's the silent ones that you don't know their position. You don't know how
Mhm.
many like ifs or maybes or what about this evidence or that. And you can go a couple ways, but one way is like if you're the more reasonable side, if in that discussion somebody comes off as very emotional and they come off as insane, you don't have
Mhm.
to do much to keep a measured like they are doing the work for you to make you look like the well-adjusted normal person. So that's like rule number 1. Don't feed into that. And
Right.
you can just let them shout off all this crazy stuff, but also just take a step back, like ask them, well, what's your evidence for this? Or somebody's like, you're a traitor. I'm like, well, what's the legal definition of a traitor? Or is it, does it make you a traitor going through the democratic process of a citizen led petition for referendum? And what about the 1998 Supreme Court reference case? And you point to these little, like you can drop these little learning moments for anybody else watching. And this could be something as like, oh, you have a family chat with somebody and like you've got a group chat and there's some family members and somebody says some crazy thing about these Alberta separatists. And
Mhm.
you can like, you don't have to get into a full blown argument just to start like subtly correcting some of these things or pushing back or asking these questions that will help convince somebody in the middle.
Yeah, that's true.
I agree.
That's true. That's true. I was asked to do a for and against conversation a couple weeks ago.
Yeah.
And so I gave my presentation, the one that you saw, Mike, and then the other guy gave his presentation as to why we should stay. He turned it into a completely partisan issue,
Oh,
and all conservatives are nasty, bad, we're going to hell, blah blah blah, basically. And it's like, okay, well, whatever. And then afterwards, went into the question and answer period, and there was this one lady. Well, there was a couple of them, but one in particular who took great exception to the headlines about how many people are here illegally, how
mm,
many non-Canadians are in our prisons, how much the human trafficking has grown, has
mm.
exploded, and she took great exception to that. And I couldn't figure out, like, visibly upset when I got there, and I couldn't figure out exactly where she was going with it. I was hoping that she was finally realizing we're in trouble. We're in trouble. We've let the fox into the hen house here. And no, that was not it at all. I was absolutely evil for bringing this up, and I was racist, and I was misogynist, and I was a
Yeah.
colonialist, and I was mega, and I was ultra right wing, and then all the names started. And this is in a room full of people, many of whom would be in agreement with her. And I said, "Okay, well, do you lock your doors at night?" And she said, "Well, of course I do. I live here downtown Edmonton. Of course I do." And I said, "Well, if someone broke into your house and ransacked it and then hurt you and hurt your kids, would you not have a problem with that and want to see some sort of restitution?" Well, but that's not, we invited these people in to come and be part of our social fabric. And she was doing an impressive amount of mental gymnastics and verbal salad cartwheels to try and to try to, to try and justify her position.
Yeah.
And I
Yeah.
said, "Okay, so you invite them into your home." Let's just say that. You invite somebody into your home, and you feed them, and you clothe them, and you give them a roof over your head, and you make sure they have everything that they need, and then they turn around, and they hurt you, and they hurt your children, and they ruin your house. I said, "You're okay with that?" And in her mind, she just could not come to a place where she could say that that was wrong
Yeah.
without feeling like she was wronging the person for saying it was wrong. And I guess when I'm saying, like, there's people you're just not gonna reach, that's the person I'm talking about.
Yeah, that's a person who you know, I don't want to stereotype, but this is goes to what we said earlier. It's a very feminine coded type of response, like this type of
Mhm.
overly nurturing, like pathologically nurturing response, where they believe, like I have these conversations with my own family members, who are, especially the more liberal female ones who are,
Mhm.
they still are under the assumption that these people that we've brought in by the hundreds of thousands and millions over the last, decade, half decade, are like political persecuted refugees. Like, they don't understand this. Like, it was never that. It's always been economic migrants. It's always been for subversive, like, at least from the federal level, I don't want to say subversive. That's a little bit too colored, but it's always been for a political aim. It's never been as this is not a rescue mission that Canada is embarking across the globe, and so, and I think a good way that I've found to at least elicit a block on Twitter, not even a reply, at least elicit a block, is I put it in terms like this, like, why do you think that you're entitled to all of the rest of the world's cheap labor?
Mhm.
Like, because essentially that's what this is. Like, why you think that you're being very generous and very kind and loving with other people's tax money, but you look at what these what we could say, right now it's obviously it's India. The highest amount of immigrants come
Yep.
from India. Years before it was the Philippines. Years before that there was Vietnamese and Chinese. These things change over time.
Yep.
The last half decade has been very specifically Indian students, quote unquote students, and economic cheap workers.
Yep.
You're importing cheap labor from across the world, and you're feeling good about yourself as if um, you're safe. Like, this is not something that we should be aiming to do. If you're truly a compassionate person, you shouldn't be wanting to um, effectively just uh, suppress the wage growth of your own country with by paying people who've come here from across the globe the literal least amount of money you can pay them to do the lowest status jobs that you would never do. What part of that is compassionate?
Well, that's just it. There's nothing compassionate about that at all. All you have done is fed into the human trafficking component,
Mm,
thinking you're doing somebody a favor. And you're right, like, a lot of it is the women, it's the liberal women that are going after that, and what pains me is I just wanna shake them and say, "Where's your mama bear?
mm.
Like, where are you
Have some
in there?"
kids.
Yeah, where is your mama bear? Like, you should be wanting to protect all the children. And and
Yeah.
and that's where this whole independence conversation comes in, really, I guess, like, now that I'm saying it out loud, is we're trying to focus in on that mama bear
May
to of
maybe
protecting.
it's worth, in those cases, maybe asking, like, well, especially to these women who are mothers, and like, well, how many people would you invite over? Like, would you be comfortable inviting to your house? Would
Exactly.
you host a house party? What if you had 20 people and you only knew, like, 20 people came and you only knew 10 of them? Like,
Mhm.
well, how comfortable would you be? Like, w would things be broken? Would your house be a wreck after? And then you could ask, like, well, what if 100 people came? Like, what are the chances that you still have food in the fridge, that
Mhm.
like, there's no damage? Like, these people, if they don't know you and they're coming into a space and it feels free, there's no there's nothing really stopping them from just saying, like, well, it doesn't really affect me, so I'm going to take this, or I'm going to use this, or if that breaks, well, it's not mine, like, it doesn't matter. they don't really have any sense of responsibility. They don't feel connected to the community. It's not like it's your next door neighbor, um, coming over for a little house party. If they break something, you're gonna see them walking your dog and you're gonna say hi, like, well, and they're gonna apologize. Like, you don't have these communities checks and balances.
Mhm.
And I don't know if that's a useful analogy or not, but I feel like once you put things into that, some of these framings of like, well, you can be compassionate, but how large can that grow? How far can you extend that circle of compassion before it becomes unsustainable? And that's a hard thing to wrap our minds around when we're told that we
It
have
is.
to hold infinite compassion for an infinite amount of people and then pay for it.
Well,
Yeah.
that's just it. That's just it. And then the other problem with regards to immigration that a lot of people just and I don't know why. I don't know what this one I haven't figured out. When people are coming from other countries and other cultures, when we go there, we experience their culture, and whether that's India, China, whatever, pick one. Well, when they come here, they're bringing that with them. So what was normal over there is probably not going to be normal over here, and that doesn't mean we have to say that it's okay. We don't. If it's not okay here, then it's just simply not okay. If having a child bride is
Mhm.
not okay in Alberta, it's not okay. It's not
Yep.
okay. Like, and I think people forget that. The values don't stop at the border. They come
Mm.
across. And so if we've got too many people coming in, then there's this values tsunami that we can't stand up against, which means we can't make sure that the networks that we have to take people in here, the infrastructure that we have to take people in a way that makes sense so that they can assimilate, they can enjoy all the things that we do. We're gonna lose it. We're gonna lose it, and that's what they're trying to do to Canada right now. But I contend that Alberta can be a lifeboat for all of Canada. And I don't mean that in that, people in other provinces can just suddenly go, "Oh, you guys do did it. I'm moving there." It's like, "No. You'll get a visa. You don't.
You can apply maybe.
You can apply. We'll see.
Yeah.
You can apply. We'll check your Twitter account and see what all you said over the last 6 years." But, I just mean that when we do this, and I really believe we will, when we forge that path, and we are the trailblazers that we're known to be, and we have our ticker tape parade on our Independence Day because we are now the Republic of Alberta. That is just gonna open up the door for other provinces to say, "You know what? They did it, we're doing it too." And
Hmm.
Saskatchewan will follow right after. There'll be some others, I think. Newfoundland might even do it. Manitoba, who knows? I don't know. The territories, they're gonna have some decisions to make. But the fact of the matter is if Alberta doesn't do this, we've done the whole entire country a complete disservice. So I think we need to.
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah, and it's a great point you make. I mean, people, this is something that separates Albertans from, if you've done any traveling around Canada, you can kind of just sense it,
Yeah.
specifically from Ontario, Quebec, BC as well, especially. Um, Albertans are not yet completely unafraid to assert their own values. You know,
Mhm.
it's like we've said on the show before and in other contexts, like you would never dream of traveling to Japan or Ethiopia or some like very or Sweden or some very monolithic country like this, and just telling them that I don't care what your social fabric is or what your cultural mores are. I'm just going to do my own thing, and you have to accommodate me and you have to accept me. There's just nowhere else in the world that functions like this. And
No.
but yet when you come here, I don't know whether it's some combination of like, Canadians have this idea of being, we're very polite, we're very accommodating, we're very nice. That's what people think about us. But a lot of that actually can kind of boil down to what it comes off as nice or accommodating or kind or polite is actually like passive aggression.
Mm.
It's sort of a shrinking, sort of a weak type of any type of assertion of any sort of value structure. We're so worried about being called a racist, like like you were called a racist or a chauvinist of some type. But Albertans don't. We That hasn't been completely beaten out of us yet, and we are sort of an anomaly right now in Canada, and that's yeah. I think what you say is right, that we are sort of maybe a test case, maybe a beacon, maybe a light on a hill is the biblical imagery, right?
That's right.
I don't
Yeah.
know if I don't know if we want to go that far yet, but I sure hope so. Like, it's. Are you hopeful? Is this what you what would you put your um if you had to give it some odds or a percentage? I don't know if you could do that, but if you had to, are you hopeful seeing what you've seen so far for the movement?
I'm probably more hopeful today than I've ever been. Yeah. Yeah, I think so. Up until we were ready to start collecting signatures, we just didn't know.
Hmm.
I mean, I had an idea. You can kind of get a feel for what's going on the different social media platforms and the conversation and whatnot. And always trying to make sure I don't get stuck in that echo chamber. I don't want to do that.
Hmm.
I want to make sure that I can see, at least most of the whole picture. And then to see these lineups right out the gate and the number of people that were ready. Um, and the other thing that spoke to me, I really thought, knowing that there were gonna be some long lineups because things are just it was friggin' disorganized chaos, right? In some ways, it kinda still is as we're trying to settle in who can take signatures, who can't, where are we going, where are we meeting? "No, they kicked us out, now we gotta go over there," like all the regulars. And, um, and I thought, "Man, if people are in these lineups for a long time, like, I know how upset people get in Costco over 20 minutes. This is gonna be awful." And that has not happened.
Yeah.
Not even once. And I'm like, "Okay, that right there, we're gonna do this.
Hmm.
We're gonna do this." And I really hope Mitch gets his prayers answered, that it is over 1,000,000
Hmm.
signatures, because that's gonna send a message right there that don't fuck around and find out. Just don't, if I can say that.
You can. You absolutely can.
This Let's just go to these negotiations, everybody in good faith. We're gonna sit at the table. We're gonna figure this out, and Albertans are gonna go our own way. And that's that.
Hell yeah. Hell yeah.
Mm,
Yeah, we say it all the time. I mean, I say it anyway. People can just do things. You can just do stuff. You
yeah,
don't have to ask permission for everything. You can just do it.
that's it.
And if you get enough people to agree with you, then just go out there and do it.
Exactly.
James, do you have anything else for our highly esteemed guest?
No, feel like I've said plenty today, but,
Likewise, I feel like I rambled too, but I hope you didn't feel talked over, Kathy.
Oh, don't worry about me. Don't worry. I have no problem. People will often I'll be in these conversations, and I'm not that gal that sort of sits there just quiet. I'll jump in or whatever. And I had one guy say to me, "Man, like you really got into that conversation." I said, "Well, you don't know who I've been married to for 30 years. It doesn't matter survival." He prepared me well for this moment.
Well, you have a way about you too that, and I see it when we're out at these events. People enjoy talking to you, and they open up around you too. So I
Yeah, they
think
do.
you're exactly where you should be and doing what you should do. And we're both very grateful that you're involved, and you're such a competent and prominent voice in this movement, because we need 12 of you. So the more women's groups that you can do and find more Kathy Fletts out there, the better, I think.
Oh, bless you. Thank you for that. That means a lot.
Well, thank you for joining us, James. If you want, I don't know if you want to close us off with anything, but I'm
yeah.
I'm talked out.
Well, thank you for coming, Kathy. Look forward to, like, you met Mike, but I look forward to actually meeting you sometime soon at one of these events. We'll be
Yeah.
out filming what we can, sharing it, and hopefully, yeah, some of these little moments, they all add up, and we all have to do what we can to just help build the movement. And yeah, so it's great to have you on. And yeah, we'll have to do this again sometime soon. We'll get an update a few months down the line as we see all this unfold.
Mhm.
Awesome. That'd be great. That'd be great.
Right
I
on.
look forward to that. Thank you. Thanks,
You're
guys, for
welcome
the
anytime.
Yeah.
That was great.
Thanks, Kathy.
All right.
Thank you. Yeah, appreciate it.
Cheers.